Hello and welcome to the Midweek podcast of First Baptist Sweetwater. My name is Jerry Hendricks, and guess who I have with me today?
Teak Hamilton?
You are correct, Teak.
I always feel like I have to answer that because we wouldn't know if they answered or not.
That's a good point. Maybe I should do a different intro.
Well, it's too late now. We're already going.
We're rolling now. Forget about it. Well, here we are again. Another week, I guess, behind us and another week ahead of us for all this sheltering stuff. So
Right.
We're doing all right.
Gotten a lot of stuff done. But man, the wind has picked up, and so my eyes are watering and puffy, and it's allergy season.
Right. I did use the drops in my eyes this morning before I left the house, and I'm feeling a little bit of that allergy pain that you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
But you and Stacy been getting outside some?
Oh, yeah. We walked up here yesterday, so that's fun. But that's kind of become our regular routine, find a new direction to walk each time.
Yeah, well, you're far enough away that there's quite a few different routes to get here.
There are, and there's a lot of hills, Sweetwater City of Hills, so that's fun.
That's right. Well, good to see you this morning. It's Wednesday, and we're here with our midweek and kind of settled in some ways to this current rhythm, but started talking this week about maybe, what this is going to look like once we start getting back together. And probably going to be more gradual than what I first anticipated. And I may have kind of jumped the gun there, but...
Yeah, I think everybody's excited about being back together. I've lost track of the number of Sundays we've not been together.
I had that same thought this morning. I was listening to one of our podcasts and Midweek podcast, and we were talking about all of this, and I, in that podcast, mentioned what week it was, and it seems like a long time ago.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I keep thinking back to, I'm like, okay, we had the rattlesnake roundup, we had spring break, so it was somewhere around there. So how far away from there? And then I'm like, well, what day is today?
Yeah, you know how I'll share with you sometimes how I will, in writing the content for a bulletin and things like that. I'll take a look at the calendar and you kind of have that panic moment because you really realize where you are in the season. Yeah, it's May's sort of that signal of.
Things are amping up.
Supper being here, and so I didn't sleep well last night.
Oh, that's not good.
Well, got a lot of things on my mind.
Oh, I thought you were excited about the meteor shower. There was a meteor shower last night.
Of course not. I didn't know that.
Okay, well there was, and it continues for a while, so you still got time to see it.
Well, that's good to know. I'll make a note of that.
You're welcome.
Right.
Today's Earth Day. Happy Earth Day.
Oh, where's Kelsey? I told Kelsey before you came in. I go, today's Earth Day. Teak will say something about Earth Day.
That's correct. That is correct.
well, thanks, Teak.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry that
Earth Day meteor shower outside. I mean, it's like the trifecta.
Allergies.
Yeah. Which we're not around. Okay, this is a sidebar, but when I was a kid, you packed for camp to go to summer camp, and it was just a bunch of clothes and stuff like that. Usually, my mom definitely would have packed it all. So you pack your clothes, your toothbrush, the important stuff. Now I think it's like, okay, which medicines do I need to take since we're going to be outdoors with me? Like, I'm not as worried about the clothes as I am which medicines do I need to have on hand at all times.
That's right. Well, I feel your pain. I've learned that.
Allergy
recently.
medicines.
Yes, right.
So,
anyways, we are off to a good start on Sunday with a new series, and we wore our church T-shirts.
Right.
Had a lot of good feedback from that.
In the middle of the service.
I mentioned that on my live feed a while ago.
I heard that. My phone was blowing up with comments about church, asking about getting them, and I just pointed them to you. I figured if anything, you needed text to come through while you were preaching or leading the conversation.
Yeah, in some ways, of course, I wanted to do that as sort of a thank you to everybody that's been meeting with during the live stream and going above and beyond and consistent attendance. Right. I mean, it's been amazing, but I knew that there'd be some that would inquire about it. I didn't expect that many all at once, and it was fun. It was affirming, I think. But we are working on getting that done, and as I shared on the live feed earlier, we'll be putting that on our link this week, the email that goes out tomorrow. So I think we'll have 2 or 3 weeks to turn in orders. It'll all be pre-order so that we're not having to manage it through our office. And since we don't have a large gathering meeting, we don't have that ability to do it like we would normally do it. But I think it'll be very effective and in terms of getting those shirts. And we would encourage you to get one of those and wear that as a reminder for yourself, particularly during this series, or a reminder to others that we're the church. It's not we're at the church building, but
Right.
We are the church. And so the
It's
series.
a good shirt, but it's an even better message.
Oh yeah,
And it's a
think
message
so.
that I think we've lost in our. Maybe it's not that we don't understand or don't know it, but we've lost it in practice over however many years. And so I like it. And part of the challenge for the family devotional conversation was to go and represent it digitally, and graphically. Visually, there we go, visually. That was 3 different words. They all probably work. And so Stacy and I went out yesterday to start working on our representation of We Are a Church. So it's going to be a project. It's going to take several days. We realize that.
We don't have many days.
I know.
Well, I think it'll be one of those things too, when we look back on this experience, we'll recognize the big part of history that we lived through. If you talk to your grandparents or great grandparents in your growing up years, you realize that they lived through a lot.
Right.
And this is the most significant event, I would say, that we've lived through as a generation. I say a generation. I realize I'm on the top end of that generation that's still living, but as in our current generations, this is probably one of the most significant things. And the numbers are still really disheartening.
Right.
I shared with you that I look at them every day, and so it's something that we will remember forever, and we'll tell our kids about.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Anyways,
but out of it could come some really good theology.
Right, I think so. And some of those things that we've talked about is one was came up early because we had scheduled if we're going with our regular schedule of meeting before all this sheltering took place, we were going to have communion on the Sunday after Easter. Right. And so we talked about that, and that conversation's ongoing.
Right. Yeah, because it's something that we feel very important about. We feel it's an important part of our tradition as Baptists and as a church family. But also we schedule communion based on a schedule of, in a sense, our theology. Like we
Right.
base it on our ministry schedule and things like that. It's not just every 3 months or whatever. It's not quarterly. It's intentional. There we go. That's what I'm looking for.
Right. And one of the conversations I've had this week about it is that there's not a lot of biblical guidance.
Oh yeah.
On it, even really in terms of much theology.
Right.
But it really, the way that communion developed was through the church.
Right.
And so that's why, and then it brings up really a very deep level of conversation about tradition.
Right.
And so we realize, because here I am thinking about my Baptist growing up tradition, mm-hmm. Communion was never really that much a part Right. of our worship experience. Right. We did it infrequently. We did it the same way every time. And so I think in the church culture today, all churches seem to be embracing it in a more meaningful way. Right. Those that have had it as a high part of their tradition, obviously I think they're probably still doing that the same ways in a lot of ways. But the rest of us are catching up to that deeper meaning. Right. But this obviously throws a different spin on the conversation that you have about the meaning of communion and how we make that a part of our worship. So it's going to be it has been on the fast track this week. I think we've talked each day about it. You and I have. So
I feel like it's kind of like at Christmas. We'll do those Christmas quizzes, and Right. we'll ask them, what did Mary ride to when she was going to Bethlehem? Was it a donkey, a car, she walked, or like someone carried her? Yeah. And everybody's like, well, a donkey. Well, when you have them read the actual scripture, that's not there. Yeah. That's something we've added in over the years and years because you're like, why would a pregnant woman have to walk that far? But then when you start thinking about communion and you start reading what's in the scripture, you realize a lot of the stuff that we talk about isn't there. It's stuff that, like you said, has been put in by the church over the years. And so we need to sometimes rethink those elements and how we do things, because if we're staying biblical, I don't know why I did air quotes, but we want to be faithful to that, but at the same time not make it so rigid that we lose the meaning of it. And I feel like sometimes that's what we've lost when I was growing up. the rigidity of it had to be scheduled as this, and this, that you lose it. It's just passing a plate and eating a chiclet and a little drop of grape juice.
Well, and I didn't really intend for us to take the bulk of our time talking about this, but it is something that in our conversation, it's at the forefront this week, and others have mentioned it in their congregational life, and so we'll be working on it. But I think the bigger part of what that brings us to is it's one more way that this experience is helping us to think about, to actually think about our worship experience, our life together, and our life with Christ. And so, all in all, we don't want to have another pandemic to get to these places where we're really considering a lot of our faith experience.
Right. I'm not one who would ever suggest that that the pandemic is punishment from God or anything like that, because I don't believe it is at all. But I do think in the midst of it, we've been able to rediscover parts of that relationship with God that have been beneficial. So it goes back to Romans 8:38. All things work out for the good of those who trust in God and love God. And so I think that that's one of those things that we're learning in this time, is that we've had time to slow down to think about some of these things and re-examine how we do and what we do and why we do.
Right. Well, I've enjoyed this time. Next Sunday, we continue in the book of Acts with the second part of Peter's sermon, and that's going to be really, really helpful, I think, in bringing together some of the general understanding of the theology as it began to develop through his preaching for the early believers. And so we'll look forward to that time together. But one of the things that you can do between now and then, and we hope that you will join us on our live stream at 10:30 on Sunday, either on Facebook or YouTube. But in getting to that end, and as we think about We Are Church, the series that we're in, and we think about the early texts that we're reading through Scripture, one is I would encourage you to follow our daily Bible readings, because they are more closely attached to what we're saying week to week than any other time of the year. All of those are lectionary passages plus a few extras, and they really help guide the conversation. And I got to notice in this when I made up the Bible reading list for next week. There's a conversation after this about that I'm excited about. But you'll see the consistent theme through there. And another thing I'd encourage you to do is to have a conversation with your family or with someone else that you're friends with in the faith about communion, and maybe just start with sharing what communion means to you, and then be willing to be open and think about how we might experience that, not just in a pandemic era, but throughout our time together as the church. So anyways, it's been good hanging out, Teak. Always good to see you, even from a distance. And so anyway, we look forward to being in your living room or on your device in some way this next Sunday.
See ya.